Hey guys, all right, we're up here for another video. So this one is one of my favorites, actually. We're just going to continue building on those basic skills that I've been teaching you guys, building on what we did last time, which is that basic skill of pencil and pressure and control, being loose with your hand and being able to sort of draw what's on the paper, not right maybe the first time, but kind of like work with that. We're going to talk about that as we go on too, and that is actually kind of a tip for drawing better. But we're going to start with today is one of the most foundational parts of drawing, and that is understanding that shapes build everything. So the title of this lesson is How to Draw a Panda. So this is a little bit of a joke, but it's also a completely serious. So you see this all the time. It happens when you're flipping through the internet, when you're flipping through whatever, and you're seeing people who are just like so good at drawing, or a tutorial or a book that tells you how to draw something. And it's just like, here's a couple of circles. And then all you got to do is turn that into a panda. And you're like, yeah, right. What the heck? What we're going to talk about as we go on in these next couple of weeks is that this isn't incorrect. This is actually completely correct. The problem is these books and these things that you're seeing are missing a step. They're missing a vital part of sort of what this means and what you do with these things. And that is things are made of shapes, yes, but really what things are made out of are what we call forms, which are three-dimensional objects and three-dimensional versions of these shapes. Because a panda, yes, when I look at them as a flat drawing, is made up of circles, but really what a panda is made up of is cylinders, spheres, cones, and other three-dimensional forms that give that thing sort of a roundness to it. And that's what we're going to focus on and talk about today and learn. What are those basic shapes? Circle, square, triangle. Really, if you can draw these three things, you can actually draw anything. And I know that sounds probably crazy and you're like, yeah, right, I don't believe you. But as we go through this class, you're going to learn how you're going to be able to draw anything. And I didn't say you can draw anything well. I said you're going to be able to draw anything. And that's the beginning of drawing things well or good or better, is understanding how to even approach them in the first place. So we're going to come back to this in a minute, and you are going to copy this, but you're not going to yet, because you don't actually know, half of you probably, how to draw these different forms, or how I'm going to be teaching you here in a minute to draw these forms. So I just want you to keep this diagram in your mind, because what we're going to do is we're going to eventually put these where they go inside of that. Here is this in a real life application. So here's me showing you this actually existing in the world. The three things: a cylinder, a cube, or a sphere, a circle, a square, or a triangle, basically, right? Is something round? Is something have hard edges? Or is something a complete circle, right? Is it like a cup, a drum? If you look right here, this party hat is a cone. These things are all cylinders with just different form and different shape to them as they go. The cube, this is literally a cube. If you look at a washer or dryer, if you look at a table, if you look at a chair, if you look at things like that are in your house, even if you look at your bed or your couch, if you think about this as a simplified form, it is a cube. It has four sides. Sometimes it has an extra side sticking up for a back, but really that's just another cube stacked on top of it, right? Maybe the cube is thin or long or short or stubby, but it is always a cube. And then we have a sphere, which is pretty obvious. Any kind of fruit, round object, ball, anything like that fits into that category. So how do we draw each of these categories and how do we understand these? You're going to draw one of each of these forms today, and that's going to be sort of like how we build on yesterday's assignment. So let's look at that. Okay, so I'm going to leave this up for a second. So let's talk about what you need to draw these things. So now that you have this copied into your sketchbook or wherever you're going to do your assignment, we are going to talk about what we need to do to build these things. So we're going to do a different example of each of these ones, and then we're going to kind of put these together. So understanding these three shapes, you have to understand three, or actually more or less two different skills. The first skill is this, and we're going to put this right here because we're going to eventually draw our sphere next to it. I'm going to have y'all draw an oval. Just like this. And we're going to write that word underneath it. So this is called an ellipse. Okay, this is the secret, actually, not just to this one, but what we're going to do down here as well. An ellipse is not a circle. An ellipse is anything that we look at that is a round circle when we look at it in real life, but when we look at it in not real life, meaning drawing life, it is not anymore. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Here's my coffee cup, a little bit of coffee in it still. It's a perfect circle right now. If I tilt this back like this, and I'm looking at the rim of this cup, what's actually happening right now is that this space right here is closing up. It closes up so much that eventually it will disappear. Boom, it hits the top, and then it gets thinner like that. That's what we're looking at right now, is that what's actually happening in real life and visually is that this amount of space right here is closing up, but not this space here. And that's how we represent this, is with an ellipse. Okay, so watch this. Now we're going to do this. So if I drew another ellipse out here, like this, and then actually another ellipse, just like this, and I connect these, together, that is how I make the illusion of a rounded sphere. And this isn't the cleanest thing ever, and I'm doing that on purpose. I want you guys to see that even when you're not sort of perfect with some of this stuff, you still get an end result. That is what I'm looking for, you guys, because like I said, I know you're not perfect, you're not the awesome, amazing drawers, but I want you to see that even when I'm kind of sloppy, these things still work, because what's important right now is not preciseness necessarily, but preciseness of this new technique that I've taught you. So there's a sphere, right? There's a round sort of circle. Okay, the trick that you guys are gonna have for drawing a square is this. The trick to this is parallel lines. Parallel, that fancy word that you probably learned in math, and that means that these two lines right here don't touch. They're going to keep going in this direction, and they're never going to touch each other. That's the trick to drawing this. Are the lines across from each other ever going to touch? So here's a square, right? The lines across from each other are never going to touch. But you have to make this into a cube. So I'm going to take this right here and make it shoot out at this angle right there. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to look at these two lines. This angle right here that I just created, is it the same angle? Meaning, like, if it's a wrong angle, right, it might like shoot off in this direction or that direction. Will these two ever touch? Now I'm going to go to this one. And notice how I'm not even worried about length right now, because what I can do eventually, which is my final thing, I'm going to make a parallel line of this, is I'm not actually worried about where these lines start and stop or end. I am worried about that this line and this line are parallel, that this line and this line are parallel, that this line and this line are parallel. Because what I can do is erase and have a really clean cube where all my lines are parallel from each other, right? This is what matters. This is the difference between this and a cube that I see from students a lot, which is, let's say you start with your square, and then you go off like this, and then this one's like maybe like this, and this one's maybe like that, right? These lines are not parallel to each other, so when I go to try to connect them to each other, I end up getting a cube that does this. This is the #1 mistake that I see from students. You're worried about where these lines end. You're not worried about where this line right here starts and whether or not you've created an actual parallel line to it. Look how crooked that line is right there, right? Look how crooked this line is to this line right here. Are these two going to touch? Well, if I just keep drawing them straight, yeah, they are going to touch. Eventually they hit each other right there. They're not parallel. That's why this cube right here is the cube that is incorrect, and this is the cube that's correct. So with these two techniques right here, we can do everything else, right? But so there's a pyramid. That's the other thing that we can draw. There's a cylinder. That's the other thing that we can draw. And then there's a cone. Well, over here, we put this in the triangle category just because we can do is we can sharpen these things up and turn them and shape them. But we do that ellipse thing again. I draw an ellipse. I bring up the sides. And I draw another ellipse. And that's a cylinder. Okay? Let's say that I want to make it into a cone. I draw an ellipse. I bring up the sides. I draw another cylinder. Why? This is super important. This is the beginning of getting better at drawing. This is that beginning of what I was saying, which is that once you can draw the basic forms and shapes, everything else is actually just another version of it. I find the middle. I find the middle. And then I just take my line and inside of this cylinder is a perfect cone, where then I erase the edges. And there's my cone. I can do the same thing for the cube. I draw a cube. This is going to be small because I'm trying to fit it in here. So I'm sorry about that. I'll make it dark so I know you guys can see it. I do the same thing. I find the middle. I take this like this, and I go like this. I can erase out the sides. And inside of my cube was also a perfect pyramid. And those are our 5 different ones: a cylinder, a cone, a cube, a pyramid, and a sphere. If we can understand these things, we can actually draw anything. And that is what your assignment is today. It's basically just to make your paper look exactly like this paper right here. So you're going to kind of create this diagram, right? We have our shapes and our forms. Because moving forward, this is how our brain needs to start thinking, is in forms. And if we can do that, then we have done what we need to do.